The moment everything went wrong, you talked. You explained. You defended. You filled the silence with words that made everything worse and solved absolutely nothing. Because nobody taught you that silence is not the absence of power. Silence is power. The most controlled, most strategic, most devastating form of power available to any human being in any high-pressure situation. The person who can stay silent when every instinct screams to speak. That person controls the room, controls the outcome, controls themselves. This book is not about being quiet. It is about understanding that in the moments that matter most, your silence will always be more powerful than your words. Chapter 1. Your mouth is costing you everything. Let's start with the moment you already know. You know the one. The conversation where everything was going wrong, and instead of staying still, instead of holding your ground in silence and letting the other person run out of road, you started talking, and then you kept talking, explaining things that did not need explanation, defending positions that were already solid until you opened your mouth and made them look fragile, filling every pause with more words, more justification, more evidence of the very thing you were trying to hide, that you were rattled, that the pressure got to you, that beneath all the words, beneath the articulate, rapid-fire verbal flood, there was a person who did not know how to be quiet when it mattered most. You know the moment. You have replayed it. You have heard yourself in memory and winced at the volume of it. Not the loudness, but the sheer quantity. The words that kept coming when they should have stopped. The sentences that built on each other not because they were serving a purpose, but because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. That moment cost you something. Credibility, leverage, respect, trust, maybe a negotiation, maybe a relationship, maybe just the quiet, private knowledge that you handled it well. And the thing that cost you all of that was not the situation. It was your mouth. Here is the myth that has been doing the damage. The culture around you, the schools, the workplaces, the social environments that shaped how you understand power and intelligence and competence, has been feeding you the same story for your entire life. The story is this. The most powerful people are the most articulate ones. The ones who can speak fluently under pressure, who always have the right answer at the right moment, who never stumble, never pause too long, never leave a silence unfilled. That story is wrong. Not partially wrong. Fundamentally, expensively, provably wrong. The most powerful people you will ever encounter are not the most verbose. They're not the quickest to respond or the most eloquent under fire or the ones who can talk their way through any situation with skill and speed. They are the ones who know when not to speak. They are the ones who can sit in a high-pressure moment, challenged, criticized, provoked, cornered, and stay quiet, composed, unmoved. While everyone around them scrambles to fill the space with noise, they hold the silence like a weapon they have been trained to use. And they win. Consistently. Not because they are smarter or more prepared or more experienced. Because they understand something that most people spend their entire lives never learning. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is power. And your mouth has been giving it away. Let's talk about what is actually happening when you speak under pressure. Because this is not a character flaw. This is not weakness in the conventional sense. This is a physiological response to threat. And until you understand the mechanism, you cannot interrupt it. When you feel pressured, challenged in a meeting, confronted in a relationship, questioned in a negotiation, criticized in public, your nervous system registers threat. The same ancient alarm system we discussed in every conversation about emotional reactivity fires up. Cortisol floods your body. Your thinking narrows. Your options feel like they have collapsed to one. Speak, defend, explain, make it stop. And so you do. Not because speaking is the right strategic choice. Not because you have assessed the situation and determined that words are your best tool right now. But because the discomfort of silence under pressure feels, to your threatened nervous system, like danger. The silence feels like losing. So you fill it, immediately, reflexively, with whatever words your anxious mind can produce fast enough to cover the gap. I call this pressure speech, and it is one of the most costly automatic behaviors a person can have. Pressure speech is not communication. It is nervous system discharge. It is what happens when the emotional brain takes over from the thinking brain and starts using your vocal cords to release tension instead of transmit intelligence. And here's what makes it so damaging. It is visible to everyone in the room. The person challenging you can see it. The people watching the interaction can see it. The colleague across the table, the partner across the kitchen, the interviewer across the desk, they can all see the moment the pressure got to you. Not because of what you said, because of the fact that you could not stop saying things. Pressure speech does not hide the fear. It broadcasts it. Now, let's break down the 3 forms it takes. Because pressure speech is not one behavior. It is 3, and each one costs you in a specific, identifiable way. The first form is over-explaining. Over-explaining is what happens when a simple answer would have been sufficient, and you gave 7 paragraphs instead. Someone questions your decision. A single, confident sentence would have closed the conversation. But instead, you explain the background. You provide the context. You walk them through your reasoning step by step, as though they cannot be trusted to accept the conclusion without witnessing the entire process that produced it. And in doing so, in offering all of that unrequested justification, you communicate something you did not intend to communicate. That you're not sure they will accept the decision without it. That you need their understanding, maybe even their approval, before you can feel settled in your own choice. That the question rattled you enough to produce this volume of response. Over-explaining does not demonstrate thoroughness. It demonstrates insecurity. And insecurity invites further challenge. The moment you over-explain, you signal that your position is negotiable. That more pressure will produce more justification. That the right strategy for the person across from you is to keep pushing, because pushing makes you talk, and talking makes you vulnerable. Every word beyond what was necessary was a crack in the wall you were trying to hold. The second form is defending. Defending is more dangerous than over-explaining because it does something over-explaining does not. It confirms that the attack landed. Think about that. When someone criticizes you, when someone challenges your competence, your character, your decision, your position, and you immediately leap into defense, what does that defense communicate? Not strength. Not confidence, not the unshakable security of someone who knows their own worth. It communicates that the criticism found a target, that it touched something real, that beneath the defense, beneath the rapid-fire counterargument and the evidence and the detailed rebuttal, there is a wound that needed protecting. The defended position is the vulnerable position. The person who does not need to defend themselves communicates, wordlessly, powerfully, simply by not engaging, that the attack was too far beneath them to require a response. That is not arrogance. That is composure. And composure under fire is one of the rarest and most powerful things a human being can display. When you defend yourself against every criticism, you tell the room that every criticism matters to you. Silence tells the room that you are the one who decides what matters. The third form is filling silence. This is the most subtle and the most universally damaging. Silence in a high-pressure interaction is not neutral. It is not empty. It is not a void waiting to be filled with whoever speaks next. Silence is leverage, and it belongs to whoever can hold it longest. When you're in a negotiation and the other party makes an offer, silence is your most powerful response. It creates pressure that words cannot. It forces them to second-guess the offer, to wonder if it was enough, to potentially improve it without you saying a single word. When you are in a confrontation and someone makes an accusation, silence communicates a confidence that no defense can match. It suggests that the accusation is so far beneath the truth that it does not warrant the energy of a response. When you're in a conversation that is escalating, silence removes the oxygen. Argument requires 2 participants. One person's silence collapses the entire structure. But most people cannot hold silence under pressure for more than a few seconds before the discomfort becomes unbearable and the words rush in to fill it. In the moment they speak, the leverage transfers. The silence was yours. You gave it away, and you gave it away for free. Let me give you the analogy that makes all of this impossible to forget. Think about a courtroom. A person is on the stand. They are innocent. They know they are innocent. and the prosecutor is questioning them, pressing them, challenging them, creating the kind of pressure that makes innocent people nervous. And the innocent person, nervous, wanting to be believed, wanting the truth to be obvious to everyone in the room, starts talking. They explain things that were not asked about. They provide context that opens new lines of questioning. They clarify details in ways that create inconsistencies. They speak so much and so anxiously that by the time they are finished, they have given the prosecutor more material than the prosecutor arrived with. Every criminal defense attorney will tell you the same thing. The most dangerous thing an innocent person can do is keep talking. Not because talking makes them look guilty, but because talking, anxious, pressured, over-explaining talking, makes them look afraid. And fear, in a room full of people trying to determine what is true, is indistinguishable from guilt. The same principle operates in every high-stakes conversation you have ever had. The boardroom is a courtroom. The relationship conflict is a courtroom. The negotiation is a courtroom. And every time you talk too much under pressure, you became your own prosecutor. Here is your assignment before this chapter closes. I want you to go back. Not far. The last time you talked too much under pressure. The conversation you have replayed. The moment you can still hear yourself in memory. The volume of it. The anxiety driving it. The words that kept coming when they should have stopped. Sit with it. Not to punish yourself. To calculate the cost. What did the over-explaining cost you? What position did the defending weaken? What leverage did you surrender by filling a silence that was working for you before you open your mouth? Make the cost real. Make it specific. Make it visceral enough that the next time the pressure builds and the words start forming, you remember exactly what those words have cost you before. Because you cannot build the discipline of silence on abstract philosophy. You build it on the concrete, undeniable, personally experienced evidence that your mouth has been the most expensive habit you have. It has been costing you everything. And the payment stops today. You now understand the mechanism. How pressure speech has been broadcasting your fear, surrendering your leverage, and handing your power to every room that has ever put you under pressure. But knowing what silence costs you is only the first step. The second step is understanding what silence can do for you. How pressure, properly understood, is not something to survive, but something to use. Chapter 2. Pressure is a test. Silence is the answer. Let me tell you something about pressure that nobody ever taught you. Pressure is not your enemy. It never was. Every high-stakes conversation you have dreaded. Every confrontation you have walked into with your chest tight and your mind racing. Every negotiation, every criticism, every moment where the room turned toward you with expectation or challenge or outright hostility. None of that was happening to you. It was happening for you. Because pressure is not a punishment. It is not bad luck. It is not evidence that your life is harder than other people's or that the universe has decided to make things difficult for you specifically. Pressure is an examination. A precise, revealing, merciless examination of exactly who you are when the conditions stop being comfortable. And like every examination, it has a correct answer. The correct answer is silence. Not always. Not in every moment of every high-stakes interaction for the rest of your life. But far more often than you have been choosing it. Far more often than the noise in your nervous system has been allowing you to choose it. Pressure is the test. Silence is the answer. And most people have been failing the test their entire lives because nobody told them what they were being tested on. Before we go further, let's establish something that this entire chapter depends on. There's a difference between what pressure feels like and what pressure actually is. What pressure feels like is danger, threat, the narrowing of options and the acceleration of time and the specific, visceral sensation that something bad is about to happen if you do not act. Right now, immediately, without hesitation. What pressure actually is, in a vast majority of situations you will ever face, is discomfort. Social discomfort. The discomfort of being challenged, of being uncertain, of not knowing exactly how this moment is going to resolve. The discomfort of a silence that has not yet been filled. The discomfort of a room that is waiting for you to respond. Discomfort is not danger, but your nervous system cannot tell the difference. And because it cannot tell the difference, because the ancient alarm system in your brain treats a tense boardroom negotiation with the same urgency it would treat a physical threat, you respond to discomfort the way your ancestors responded to danger. You act immediately, reflexively, without the pause that intelligence requires. You speak when you should be silent. You defend when you should be still. You move when the most powerful thing you could do is stay exactly where you are and let the pressure work for you instead of against you. This is what I call pressure illiteracy, the inability to accurately read a high-stakes situation because the feeling of pressure has overwhelmed the function of judgment. And pressure-illiterate people do not lose because they are less capable than the people across from them. They lose because they react to the feeling of the situation rather than the reality of it. You have been responding to how pressure feels. You need to start responding to what pressure actually is. Here is what pressure actually is in 3 of the most common high-stakes environments you will encounter. And in each one, I want you to see not just what the situation is, but what silence does inside it. The first environment is confrontation. Confrontation is the situation most people handle worst under pressure. Because confrontation is personal. It is direct. It lands on the part of you that cares most about how you are perceived, your competence, your character, your worth. And when something lands on the part of you that cares, the urge to speak is almost irresistible. Someone accuses you of something. Someone challenges your position aggressively. Someone comes at you in a meeting, in a relationship, in a public setting, with energy designed to destabilize you, to provoke a reaction, to make you smaller in the room. The pressure-illiterate response is immediate, defensive, loud. It meets the aggression with counter-aggression or meets the accusation with a flood of justification that confirms, to everyone watching, that the pressure found its target. The pressure-illiterate response is silence. Not the silence of having nothing to say. Not the silence of being too shocked to respond. The deliberate, composed, chosen silence of someone who has assessed the situation and decided that what the other person needs most right now, an emotional reaction, a defensive performance, proof that they got to you, is exactly what they are not going to receive. That silence does something in a confrontation that no response ever can. It transfers the pressure back. The person who came at you with aggression designed to provoke a reaction now has no reaction to feed on. The energy they brought into the room has nowhere to go. The silence that greets their confrontation is not empty. It is charged. It communicates something so clearly that words would only diminish it. That you're not moved. That you're not threatened. That whatever they brought into this room was not enough. In confrontation, silence is not retreat. Silence is the most dominant response available. The second environment is negotiation. Negotiation is where the power of silence is most documented, most studied, and most consistently demonstrated, and where most people still refuse to use it because the discomfort of holding it feels unbearable. Here is the dynamic. You are at a critical moment. An offer has been made. A number has been put on the table. A position has been stated that requires your response. Every instinct in your body wants to respond immediately, to counter, to engage, to keep the conversation moving because movement feels like progress and silence feels like stagnation. But silence in this moment is not stagnation. Silence in this moment is the most powerful negotiating tool you possess. When you stay silent after an offer, genuinely, comfortably, unhurriedly silent, you create a pressure that the other party now has to manage. Their mind begins to work against them. Was the offer too low? Did I misread the situation? Should I have come in higher? Should I say something? Should I improve the offer before they respond? The silence forces them into their own head. And people negotiating against their own internal monologue almost always make concessions they were not planning to make. Experienced negotiators know this. They use silence as a deliberate strategy. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that what they do not say is worth more than anything they could offer. In negotiation, the first person to speak after a critical offer has almost always weakened their position. Hold the silence. Let them move first. The third environment is criticism. Criticism is where silence is most counterintuitive and most powerful. Because when someone criticizes you, publicly or privately, fairly or unfairly, everything in you wants to respond, to correct the record, to provide context, to demonstrate that you are not what the criticism implies. And in most cases, that response is the worst thing you can do. Here's why. A silent, composed response to criticism communicates something that no defense ever can. It communicates that the criticism did not find a target, that it landed on someone so secure in their own assessment of themselves that external criticism simply does not have the penetrating power it would have against someone less grounded. The person who responds to every criticism with immediate defense is telling the room something about themselves, that the criticism matters, that it touched something real, that their self-assessment is dependent enough on external opinion that a challenge to that opinion requires an immediate response. The person who receives criticism in silence, who listens fully, who does not flinch, who responds, if at all, with economy and without emotion, is telling the room something entirely different, that they are the one who decides what is true about them, not the critic, not the room, not the opinion of someone whose judgment they may not even respect. In criticism, silence is not acceptance. Silence is the clearest possible demonstration that you are not governed by the judgments of others. Now let's talk about your personal threshold, because this is where the work gets specific. Every person has what I call a silence threshold, the point at which the discomfort of holding silence under pressure becomes so intense that they break and begin to speak. For some people, this threshold is very low. 3 seconds of silence in a tense moment, and the words start coming automatically. For others, it is higher. They can hold longer, but eventually the discomfort wins. Your silence threshold is not fixed. It is not a personality trait you were born with and are stuck with. It is a capacity like physical endurance that can be trained, expanded, and developed through deliberate practice. But you cannot expand a threshold you have not yet identified. So here's the work. Think back through the high-pressure interactions of your recent life. Where's your threshold? How long can you actually hold silence when every instinct is screaming to fill it? 3 seconds? 5? 10? Be honest. The honest number is the useful one, because it is the number you're going to extend deliberately, incrementally through the practice that this book is building toward. Know your threshold, then exceed it every single time. Here is your behavioral instruction for this chapter. In the next high-pressure interaction you face, and pressure will provide the opportunity sooner than you expect, your only assignment is this. Wait 3 full seconds longer than feels comfortable before you respond. Not 3 seconds of dramatic, performative silence. 3 seconds of genuine, composed, deliberate waiting. 3 seconds of letting the pressure exist in the room without immediately acting to relieve it. 3 seconds sounds like nothing. In a high-pressure moment, it is an eternity. It will feel wrong. It will feel like you're losing ground. It will feel like the silence is working against you. It is not working against you. It is working for you. In those 3 seconds, your thinking brain re-engages. The emotional flood begins to recede. The intelligence that pressure had temporarily knocked offline starts to come back online. And the response that comes after those 3 seconds will be categorically different from the one that would have come without them. More precise, more composed, more powerful. 3 seconds. That is your practice. That is where the transformation begins. You now understand that pressure is not your enemy. It is your examination. And you have seen what silence does inside the 3 environments where most people fail that examination most completely. But knowing when to be silent is only part of the discipline. The other part, the daily, practiced, craftsman-level skill, is learning how to say less in every interaction, not just the high-stakes ones. Because the discipline you build in ordinary moments is the only discipline available to you in extraordinary ones. Here is what you now know that you cannot unknow. Your mouth has been costing you. Every word spoken in panic, every defense offered under pressure, every silence filled with noise that served nothing and exposed everything that was power leaving your body. You now know that pressure is not your enemy. It is your examination. And silence is the correct answer. You know that the person who waits, who breathes, who holds the space while everyone else fills it with fear, that person holds the room without ever raising their voice. You know that saying less means more. That restraint is not weakness. That the quiet ones are not the passive ones. They are the ones who have done the work that the loud ones are still avoiding. So here is your challenge. The next time everything in you wants to explain, defend, justify, and fill the silence with proof that you are not afraid, stop, breathe, hold it. Let the silence do what your words never could. Let it communicate your composure. Let it demonstrate your control. Let it deliver the message that no sentence has ever been able to carry. That you are not rattled. That you are not threatened. That you're not someone who needs the room's approval to know your own worth. Silence is power. You have always had it. Now use it.